Working with repressed anger. I've been struggling with anger for all of my life. It's not that I don't get angry, but I have to really reach my limits to do so. And when I do, I feel like a 5-year-old. I seem to lose almost, sorry, I just have to open it here, to lose almost all reason and tend to say things I regret. Plus, I seem to lose almost every argument when I get angry because I'm unreasonable. An earlier therapist of mine would have me lay down on a bed, punch pillows, and scream in order to release pent-up anger. But I felt like this only made things worse as I would still hate my anger, but was also very explosive and short-tempered. I tried his approach for 8 months and stopped because I felt like punching a wall whenever I got even a little bit upset, and I never felt good, even after yelling, screaming, or punching something. I realized later that even though I was expressing my anger, I was still very resistant to it. I've identified some of the reasons why I'm suppressing my anger, which are I'll be attacked, therefore I'm unsafe. I'll hurt the other person, I'm a bad person. And what I realized recently is that I can't separate the emotion of anger from its expression. Any ideas on how to approach this? Um, okay, I'm just going to look at it because it was a little bit long, but it's interesting. See, again, I'm gonna have to think a little bit because I haven't had this experience, but I know that as we keep thinking, it'll come to me. Um, because the part that I want to focus on is he says I tried his approach, which is punching and yelling and expressing, and yet something still seems stuck. Like it's like he said, I can't separate the emotion from the what is it from its expression. Do you have something? I don't have something in this moment.
Yeah, well, the I think the initial thought that I have is just maybe the level of ego judgment for anger specifically is very pronounced. So
Yeah,
even though you've done a lot of work with this anger, um, but it takes you to get to this tipping point, um, to for it to come up and to be accessible. I guess just shows how far down it's been pushed. And I also, which again points to that it's a lot of work to do. If it's been that suppressed for your entire life, 8 months of this kind of like anger work, I'm not saying it's not a lot, but it could be a portion of a much larger amount to do before it becomes more accessible. But there are indications that it's become accessible as well. When there was the part about uh, getting triggered very easily,
yeah,
that to me sounds like a very good thing because it's there ready to come, but you still have the ego judgment of it being a bad thing, and that you probably feel bad because you were an angry person. Whereas, of course, that's not true. You just have anger and you're ready to release it. So I initially, well, I still do interpret that in a good way. You've done 8 months of the kind of
yeah,
work that does allow you to access anger. There's still a big amount of ego judgment present. I think that's normal for being a particular, someone who suppresses anger in particular. Um, so although there's a lot of this is wrong, this isn't good, I don't feel good, the actual things that you've said all sounded very good to me, that you've done eight
yeah,
months of like exactly what you should be doing to access your anger is releasing it physically in a safe space. But the discomfort and the pain is that the ego is very it particularly does not like to see itself being an angry person, and that will just take a long time to change. And it's not about willing it to change. It won't change other than through this kind of release. I just think about myself with suppressed anger, and I used to judge people who showed anger. I was like, that's pathetic. You know, I can't believe how pathetic that is. And obviously that's because I had a lot of suppressed anger that I had to let out. That was my ego's judgment of myself. Should I have been an angry person? So that answer will probably be very unsatisfactory to the ego because it will want something that will calm it and make it feel better. But my reading of that is that you're doing exactly what you should, and that there's just a lot of judgment coming from it, and that continuing on that and being able to release in a safe space. Again, it's more ego judgment that you have these arguments because you're releasing anger in person with another person, and anger is completely irrational. I don't think anyone's going to win any arguments when they're in a cloud of anger being released. So if you can have enough distance in those moments internally where you recognize that anger is coming up, however it manifests for you, whether it's contractions in your body or whatever it is, you can remove yourself from the situation if possible and do whatever you want. Say, like, the worst things imaginable about the person who's annoyed you, or the kind of work that you're doing, beating a pillow, being physical in any way. And it's really about getting to the depth, when you almost shock yourself. You're not doing this to anyone, of course, you're just really letting it come up. And I can again say from my experience, you will hit these uh, ceilings or floors when you're like, oh my God, I didn't realize that that was in me. And then there's another one, and then there's another one. But it's a very long time. So, like I said, 8 months, it's a lot, but there could be plenty more.
Yeah. The first thing that I just thought of is because he mentions that he has probably exploded at people a few
Mhm.
times,
Yeah,
this creates there's even more hesitation to feel anger even if he's alone
yeah,
because of a memory that if I feel this and if I act in this way, I hurt people and it's wrong. I mean, not wrong, but it's not ideal to be hurting people with your anger. And so that's the first little confusion. And yes, in the moments when you are alone and you're full of rage, if those thoughts come up, yes, it's difficult because they make you feel afraid to feel the anger. It's never going to change. But ultimately, in those moments, you just have to have a little bit of courage when you're alone to feel the rage, right? It's whenever we're doing this stuff especially in like more in the beginning, there is resistance, and they will come in the form of thoughts saying you shouldn't be doing this, you're going to hurt somebody, you're a bad person. You literally have to listen, like just hear the thoughts in your mind and then do the action. And it's interesting that I can talk about this stuff because I've done it so much that's why I'm like, what do I do in those moments? So the first thing that comes to mind, I'm just trying to read here again. Okay, so like I'm trying to picture this 8 months, but then basically what he's saying, I think, is that he did that for 8 months and then he continues to be someone that is full of rage and will snap at people in a second, right? And so that tells me first that there's a giant amount, sort of, I think, similar to me, of suppressed anger. But the first thing that I want to say is in those moments when you feel that energy, it's fresh, it's right there and you're alone, right? The you can only feel something completely if you're alone because you're not going to be afraid and worried that somebody's around, somebody's going to hear you. So what I do, especially if it's at the highest level of rage, is there's something that you're going to have to do physically. Um, I'm trying to remember like the moments when I had so much rage, I would have to do this thing like 5 times. What I'm basically saying is, it goes even beyond just punching because sometimes you can, that's good. But I think when it's just like unbearable, you almost just want to tighten your whole body, but like to the maximum where you do it like for 20 seconds that you kind of lose energy and you don't have the strength to keep doing it. But when the rage is gigantic, I'd have to do that 5 times and I'd have to breathe because my heart rate it would go very high. And then I'd breathe for a minute or two and literally I'm like, I'm getting ready for the next one. I'm getting ready for the second one. And to be as clear and practical as possible, what I would do to embody just how much I want to destroy the world. I would, everything. My face has to become almost like a demon in pure, like you just want your face is like I want to destroy the world and I have zero empathy. And so when you do all of this stuff, and I mean, you could scream if nobody can hear you. You have to kind of use your imagination. How can I express this a little bit more in that moment while being safe physically, of course? And so how that works is if you need five different explosions, that's how it goes. It's like you're gonna do something, you're gonna say something, then it's like too much. You do like 10, 20 seconds, then you stop and you breathe. Your heart, it's going very fast. Then when you feel a little bit more calm, you can still feel, no, I still have rage. It's still here. And then you do it again and again. For me, I think the most was 5 times. Usually it's not that many times anymore. And what I also want to say that's very specific is the more that you work with your anger and this is you becoming familiar, this is going to happen over and over. You know that it's working when in that moment that you want to explode and you do that practice over and over, you're going to feel the rage like it's this big. Then you did one explosion, it'll do this. Then a second explosion, this. Then, like the final one, you're like, yeah, there's not much here, but there's still something. And then you do that one. And then you're like, okay, I think I'm good for now. And you can feel it just like a fuel or a fire it just completely like disappears and then you're like okay, I'm fine. That's when you know that you were able to work with all of the rage that was in that moment and then you basically burned through that amount. But like we've said, like I've said in my videos, there is so much of it, especially if you suppressed it your entire life like me. I never felt anger, so thousands and thousands of times I suppressed my anger, so there's really a huge amount.
Yeah. And the ego, of course, will probably be judging you as you're doing it. So you can just
Yeah.
remember that you're doing it. It doesn't say anything about the person that you are, and you can enjoy it. It's a way for you to get this out. And if you manage to do the things that Steve said, there's almost like a flow state element to it where you just get in the rhythm and the things that want to be said will just fly out of your mouth. And the more you let them and the darker they become, the more you're tapping into what's really there. And it says nothing about good, bad, whatever.
Yeah. Isn't it an interesting thing how doing something, you're just literally working with your imagination. If you're alone and nobody can hear you and see you, you're working with your imagination. And so that shows you how much we are programmed to think that the mind is the most real. If nobody's being hurt by what you're doing, then how can it, like you said something that's I was trying to connect to that. Like how can the resistance of it is so strong that you're just using your imagination and your ego is saying this is dangerous, right?
Mm,
Imagine that I'm sitting here and then I just imagine that there's a fire. That's not going to create a fire. And so it's sort of like believing that if I just think about a fire enough, I'm just going to lit on, burst into flames, which is impossible. And so it just shows you the power of the mind.
exactly, yeah.
Okay, let me go to the next one.